Let the word go
The
forth.
challenge, the opportunity to connect. The 1960s, a time of imagination and change, a time of anger and fear. The 1960s, a pioneering program called Challenge
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
that looked at our connections, our divisions, through the lens of shared values.
With something real.
60 years later, we examine our divisions, our connections, our shared pains and successes in a new program called Challenge 2.0. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. That quote, attributed to the late American anthropologist Margaret Mead, has inspired countless activists. That included a small but dedicated group of men and women who began a pilgrimage from Washington State to the Middle East in 1982. They walked 6,700 miles. More than 40 years later, their experience offers important guidance to activists seeking positive change today. In this episode of Challenge 2.0, we meet the Atomic Pilgrim, who shares his experience, wisdom, and guidance. Well, we're very fortunate to have with us today James Patrick Thomas, and Jim is, I understand, what you generally go by.
Yes.
The author of Atomic Pilgrim, documenting an amazing story of a 6,700-mile walk. And I've got to ask you before we get into the specifics, how many pairs of shoes did you go through?
Only about 3.
Really?
Yeah. There was I guess it's still marketed, shoe goo. It's kind of a plastic, and so I don't know, every 2 months or so we would apply another layer to the bottom of our shoes, and yeah.
You joined this group, and in 1982, 6,700-mile walk. What motivated you to join with them?
Well, it was one of the darkest periods of the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
Reagan had just come in and was using very bellicose language, almost veiled threats against the Soviet Union. At that time, there was about 70,000 nuclear weapons between the U.S. and the Soviet Union's nuclear arsenals. And everybody in the United States was concerned about the possibility of nuclear war. There were new books out, Jonathan Schell's The Fate of the Earth. And in '83, there was ABC's The Day After.
This is Beale. Confidence is high. I repeat, confidence is high. Roger, we've got 32 targets in track and 10 impacting points. I want to confirm, is this an exercise? Roger, copy. This is not an exercise.
Roger, understand. Major Reinhardt, we have a massive attack against the U.S. Navy at this time. ICBMs. Numerous ICBMs. Roger, understand. Over 300 missiles inbound now.
And all of these things were really riveting people's attention. And for me, I had just newly become aware of the nuclear peril about 6 months before. And to me, it just seemed that it was something I had to get involved with. But I also got involved with other people, the fellow pilgrims. And it wasn't just a protest march. It was primarily a plea and a prayer for peace.
You got started on the walk. You joined it. You had this long distance to go. How far into it did you go before you realized the enormity of what you were undertaking in terms of the demand on yourself and the demand of being part of a group?
I think all of us recognized early on the enormity of it and the uncertainty of what it would really demand of us early on. after a few miles, the first blisters set in, and it took each of us about 4 weeks for those blisters to turn into calluses, and for our muscles to really get attuned.
Mm-hmm.
The thing with living in community probably hit, a few months after that, both with an understanding of the difficulty of being together pretty much on a 24/7
Right.
basis, often in times in the same room that we'd sleep in, like a church hall or a school cafeteria. But it was a loving community. It was a community that had a joint mission of bringing about a more peaceful world.
So were they about the same, or would you say the emotional demands of dealing with issues such as being in such close contact were roughly on a par with the physical demands, or was there one that tended to outweigh the other?
There was 20 of us in the core group, so I'm sure there's 19 other answers to this. But for me, it was a mental challenge. We walked between 8 and 10 hours a day, averaging about 20 miles a day. And when you're walking across the country or across other countries, most of the time you're in rural areas. Before the walk, I had this very demanding job of working in a television station, and split-second timing was of essence. And then here I am, in Kansas or someplace else, out in the rural areas, and there's fields, there's sky, and that's about it. And so it was a tremendous mental challenge to kind of switch gears and get into pilgrim mode. But once I did, it got a lot easier to just be accepting of whatever there was in the present moment. There were at times, especially when I would get tendinitis or some other kind of physical thing come up, and the mental challenges, spiritual challenges would resurface. Even when I was walking across Europe, there were several instances where I just, I came up against a wall.
Yeah.
And I had to, give into that in a way that would have basically taken me out of the walk. Or just say yes to God, to surrender. Not my will, but thine be done. And that is when this wonderful sense of deep peace came and replaced all of the fretting and anxiety.
There was an article, I must have read it a couple of years ago in the New York Times, I think it was, and it documented a college student who got into social justice issues and activism, and she bumped into her college advisor. And the college advisor asked her what she was doing, listened very patiently, and said, I don't think you have the spiritual foundation to sustain you in this, that you're going to burn out. Was that important to you and to your group as you sought to undertake this and then push through all that walking?
Physically, we trained before the walk, and some didn't, and some that didn't have any problems, and those of us that were trained did have physical problems. The same was true with the spiritual or mental. To some extent, the spiritual formation, especially for me, was as we were walking. There's an old adage about going on pilgrimage. It's not just a physical journey. It's also an interior journey. And that was very much the case that I found.
So I suspect a lot of people out there are saying, okay, this is this long journey. You started in Western Washington. You ended up in the Middle East. Give us some of the key points. Give us a sense of what the walk actually entailed then.
The first part in '82 was walking across the United States. It was very challenging on certain regards, but it was also very beautiful to be able to experience this country in a way that most of us never get to experience,
Right.
even those that drive across the United States, which itself is amazing. But having this great adventure of walking across the United States was amazing. It was also amazing from the standpoint of getting in touch with the local people. When you're walking across the country, especially the United States, most of it's in rural areas, as I've said.
Right.
So it's red, red state, blue state. Most of it's red. And in the early 1980s, some very significant, almost virulent anti-communism.
Right.
So anyone talking about nuclear disarmament was suspect. But I think with our walk, because we were literally walking our talk, it gave us instant credibility, or at very least, people were curious about what we were doing and why, what motivated us to do this, of taking 2 years out of our lives and walking across, halfway across the world.
Yeah. Could you maybe give us an instance of where you wouldn't have expected a supportive reception that you got one?
Yeah, I mean, I'll name two.
Okay.
One was in southern Idaho, a small Mormon town, and the people there were a little bit standoffish and weren't quite certain of the wisdom of letting us, hosting us and giving us a meal at dinner. But they also said, we didn't want to miss an opportunity to befriend Jesus. Another one that sticks out is when we were in, I think it was southern Indiana. When we would walk during the day, each of us had our own pace. And so the 20 of us would be spread out maybe 3-4 miles from beginning to end. So some of us had already walked past this one farmhouse. It was a Sunday afternoon, and there was an older couple sitting on their porch. And they had already gotten their curiosity piqued with the others who had walked by their house. And so as I walked past, the guy said, "Come on over." And so I told him what we were doing and why we were doing it. And the next thing I know, I'm sitting at their kitchen table with a big piece of homemade chocolate cake in front of me. And a couple more pilgrims came in, and they wouldn't think of letting us go without giving us a big bag of potatoes and carrots from their garden. So it wasn't just the acceptance, but it was the generosity of people meeting total strangers, and we weren't, well dressed or necessarily clean, and because sometimes it would be
You've been on the road for a while.
It would be like a week between showers and such, but it really convinced me, because it's happened again and again, convinced me that we have more in common with our fellow human beings than we give ourselves credit for.
Did you find that the motivation that was driving you and perhaps the messaging that you shared with people changed? Perhaps as you had encounters such as you just described in Indiana and Idaho?
I don't think our message changed. It was calling people to take seriously the threat of nuclear war. And our message was mainly to people in churches and other world religions, to have a collective meeting for the world religions to say no to war.
Mm-hmm.
Not just nuclear war, but no to war. And that message didn't change. That message was one that our two older members of the walk, Father George Zabelka and Father Jack Morris. George, during World War II, had been the Catholic chaplain to the men who dropped the bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
That had a very personal tug on him then.
Very certainly. And he felt a certain, even though he wasn't involved at all in the decision to drop the bombs,
Right.
he felt a moral responsibility that he had blessed the men both before and after their missions, without realizing immediately the immorality of those actions. And it took him a while to have that conversion, but eventually made the conversion to nonviolence and was giving workshops on peace and nonviolence for years before the walk. Yeah.
Did he ever say, after the crew that had dropped the bomb, did they come back and express any misgivings about that, or?
No.
Okay.
No, none that he knew of.
Right.
Now there was a man that George met when we were in Salt Lake City, visiting the Catholic Cathedral in Salt Lake City. He had been one of the crew on a B-29 on August 6th, a photo reconnaissance mission. So it wasn't just the plane with the bomb.
Right.
There was several other B-29s that were either photo reconnaissance or taking environmental samples or whatever, because the Manhattan Project, General Groves and whatnot, really wanted to figure out all of the effects of the bomb. And so George met this one guy on this photo reconnaissance mission that flew in low, I guess an hour or two after the atomic explosion. And he described to George what he saw. He saw the writhing bodies of the victims. And he broke down in tears every time he told that. And he said that he told George that after they got back, that the ones on his plane, not the others, but the ones on his plane, made a commitment to each other that when the war is over, that they would do everything they could do for the rest of their lives for peace. Yeah.
Interesting. You were talking about your trip largely through the United States. You then went over to Europe.
Yes.
And people are probably going to wonder, how did you get from the U.S. to Europe? You didn't walk across the water.
No,
what happened
we
there?
couldn't figure out how to pitch our tents at night. No, but seriously, we took a flight over, started walking in Cork, Ireland, on St. Patrick's Day, and walked through the Republic, and then spent a week walking through the north. And at that time, the Northern Ireland was still very much embroiled in the Troubles. And so in the Republic, there was an outpouring of Irish hospitality that was incredible. They would bring out their bagpipes and marching bands and march us, with us into town, give us a great send-off. It was wonderful. In the North, because of the violence, it was very much subdued, but it still had an Irish character to it. Highlight of a different sort, when we were walking through Yugoslavia. It was still one country.
Yeah.
It was under communist rule, not allied with the Warsaw Pact, but still communist.
What was the reaction of the Europeans then to the focus of your march?
Well, in '83, the United States was just preparing to introduce the intermediate range nuclear missiles, the Pershing IIs and the ground-launched cruise missiles. So there was literally millions of people in the streets through most of '83 marching for peace and against the opposing the U.S. deployment. And so there was wide acceptance. It was a little bit different in each country. So in France, which has its own and still own independent nuclear force outside of NATO control, it was a little bit reserved. And then in Italy, because we were Catholic, it was very welcoming. In Greece, it was a little bit different, just because I think it was more into winter by then. We walked through Greece in November. Every time we got near a school, the kids would come out and they would want us to talk to them in English so that they could get practice with their English. Israel was different because we walked both in Israel proper, but also down the occupied West Bank. We walked through Nablus and Ramallah. We witnessed homes that had been bulldozed by the Israeli military. Just got a huge introduction to facts on the ground that don't usually get reported, even now in the U.S. media, of just how brutal both the settlers are against Palestinians as well as the Israeli Defense Forces.
Now, you wrapped up, if I remember correctly, your walk in, was it Bethlehem?
Yes.
You're finishing your walk. Did you have a sense of fulfillment? What emotions, what perceptions went through you at that point?
I was so tired. When we were up in Nazareth a few weeks before, people, various pilgrims that had the energy took day trips to the Sea of Galilee and the River Jordan and whatnot. I couldn't take any more new scenery or new people or new sights. I was just overloaded. And so same when we got to Bethlehem. I mean, we arrived in Jerusalem a few days before, and I went to, Church of the Holy Sepulchre and the other sites around in Jerusalem. But I was just exhausted. At the same time, I knew that I had survived, and that this was a tremendous accomplishment for all of us, both as a group, everybody that we started with back in Washington State 20 months before were there in Bethlehem. So we had a closing mass Christmas night, and I can't remember if it was George or Jack during their homily said, "We have come to Bethlehem, but now we must go to Jerusalem." Obviously, we had already been in Jerusalem,
right.
But he was thinking metaphorically that we need to continue to bear our cross,
right,
to suffer for peace. Yeah.
What, as you went through this walk and the experience, what lessons, and I'm thinking of people that are watching today that are concerned about different elements of society and what we're seeing manifest itself, what do you think are some of the positives and the weaknesses of your particular experience and how that might apply in terms of advice you might give to others?
Well, maybe the weakness is thinking we could do it all individually or ourselves. The power is building community and saying, what we can't do individually, we can do collectively. And I think that's the important thing, is to build community, to say, and the other thing is maybe another weakness is, this is a huge issue. For us, it was, confronting nuclear weapons and national security. And the weakness would be in saying, what am I? Only a layperson. I can't do anything. I don't have a degree in, international studies. I can't do anything about that. And the thing is that each of us is a citizen, both of the United States, but also of the world. And we have a responsibility to take action, to build peace. And that's the strength.
An amazing experience and testimony, and as you said, walking your talk. Thank you so much, Jim. And I think anybody that's watching this says, okay, that was back in 82, 83. That was just really the beginning of what you were doing on behalf of peace and in terms of the impact of nuclear weapons. So you've nicely agreed to stick with us for a second part of this conversation, which we're going to pick up for next week's episode. So, Jim, thank you so much. And again, your book is Atomic Pilgrim, James Patrick Thomas, and I can tell you from personal experience, it's a very good read. Thank you very much, Jim.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And thank you for tuning into this episode of Challenge 2.0. We hope you'll tune in again next week to the next part of our conversation. Thank you very much.